You feeling stuck lately? Like life's passing you by? Get to know M.A.Y.A.
Acronym, My Ambition, Your Ambition.
Reconnect with your dreams, your goals, your ambitions. Find your motivation and start to live the life you desire. Explore the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast at M.A.Y.A.com.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to episode 59 of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. I'm liking how they're just starting to really rack up. And this is like, to me, one of those times where this is a conversation that I think is so important that people really need to think about. But before we jump into that, let's get through our housekeeping items, of course. So as I say, it's a podcast that I like to think is forward thinking. I want to normalize the conversation about mental wellness. And I want to do it more now than ever because I keep hearing more people, more so celebrities, speaking up about mental health issues. You had Chance the Rapper saying something. We can go back to obviously M.A.Y.A and Simone Biles. The conversation is constantly put on the table, and yet I don't feel we have picked it up and really began to have it. Well, part of what I want to do with my podcast is normalize the conversation about mental wellness, just like we would normalize the conversation about any other type of health issue that you might have. Except the difference about mental wellness is, I always say, your brain is the thing that's running it. So making sure you're taking care of it is absolutely paramount. So I want to be forward thinking my perspectives and share things with you, but I want to focus this podcast really about pulling back that veil of self-doubt and self-sabotage that plagues so many of us in our lives and help you to identify those ambitions, whether they're big or small, and help you to harness that motivation to yield the satisfaction and success that you seek in your everyday life, not the big lofty goals. I want people to stop thinking about the long-term big goals and think about the day-to-day everythings, because that becomes quantitative. So I want the daily experience to be qualitative. So as they amass for you, it's so much better. So if you're a first-time listener or viewer, well, welcome. Buckle up for safety, as I like to say, because occasionally it could be an unexpected bumpy ride. Because I always say to my clients, to really do the work, you have to get uncomfortable to get back to being comfortable to grow. That's just part of doing the work. And of course, if you're a returning listener or viewer, well, you know how we do things here. You're familiar with it. I always say, grab your beverage of choice, get a pencil and paper so you can jot things down. And you know what? You may say, hey, M.A.Y.A, you said something. I got some questions. Remember, there's a rule here. This is not a therapy session. This is not counseling. This is not advice. I am your friendly neighborhood mental wellness advocate. I'm here just to share information with you, and you are to go forth in the world and to think about it. If you find that you really need help with something, then hey, go talk to a counselor, a therapist. Do that kind of work. So by no means am I giving the answers to any of your questions, just giving you food for thought as you work towards having better mental wellness. The rule of this podcast, especially for my first-time listeners, if you're just jumping in at this episode, it's okay because we're 59 in, is that you work at your own pace, because there might be an episode that literally you're back in, this is 59, so you could be back at 40 because that's the one that really got you thinking, got those mental juices flowing, and I'm okay with that. But anytime you're front and center with me, I always enjoy having people on the show and commenting and sharing what they think. It's always a good thing. So for that next 60 minutes, it's going to be all about you. So get comfortable, find a place that it can be quiet if possible, so you can be focused. Like I said, grab that beverage of choice. I figured I'd caffeinate today with some coffee, and let's do the work. If you want to get involved in the conversation, you can always join the conversation just like a person here. You can type a comment, whether it's in Facebook or YouTube, and I can share it on the screen just like this. Hello, Roburn, I got your message. He's like, where have you been? I've been missing you. I've been so inconsistent with my shows, and I apologize because the work I'm doing offline is really important, and it does help me to bring things online. I'm trying to get back to a normal day and time, but it's been difficult, but I'm still committed to still getting here at least every single week when I can. So I appreciate, Roburn, he's in Hawaii, aloha, that you actually missed that I wasn't around at the time I normally am. It's good to know that somebody misses me. I do get good feedback from people. So just like Roburn, you can always type a comment into YouTube or to Facebook, and I can share it on the screen just like that. Remember, I said this is the 59th episode. So you can always find episodes of M.A.Y.A at M.A.Y.A.com. That's the easiest way. Remember, with every episode, I give podcast resource companions, which means supplemental things that I think can really give the conversation more depth, can give you more to think about. So you just go to M.A.Y.A.com, you click on podcast resources, and the first one right there will be episode 59. And you can kind of read through the article. Sometimes they give you some things to work on, some checklists if you're struggling with maybe a task. So it's definitely some things I think it's worthwhile. Of course, you should subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's other ways you can watch the shows. Just type in Maya Akai. You're going to get a whole bunch of Japanese anime, and boom, there I am. All right. But I'm not going to say if you happen to be a podcaster and you just listen to my episodes via podcast, that's okay too. You can find me pretty much on every podcast platform. I'm actually proud to say that. You can find me on Apple Podcast, iTunes, Google, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audible, Spotify. All you have to do is pretty much search Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition. A lot of different Maya things will pop up. So you may have to put the full title of the podcast in. You may even have to put M.A.Y.A, and boom, I might pop up that way. And the easy way to kind of know what's going on with Maya too, if you're not going to mayakai.com, you can get social with me. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Maya_Akai, or Facebook at Maya Akai Presents. And those are ways that you can get tied into the show. Well, business as usual, toolbox, open it up. It's been obviously, I think I might be 10 days off from doing this, but whether here nor there, hopefully you've been using your Maya toolbox on a regular basis. Everything we do in the show, I give you a takeaway, something that you can take out and use every day. Yes, it's not tangible, but it's important. So our most important tool we always talk about is our emotional intelligence, the EI, which I refer to obviously that way, where you can perceive a situation, evaluate it, and then act accordingly. But with EI, what becomes so important is you learn not just to understand and navigate your own emotions, you begin to be able to understand other people. Hence, that sense of apathy may be kind of growing with you over time. As I had said so many times, the overarching, kind of theme for 2021 is knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, says Aristotle, a Greek philosopher. If he was thinking that way back when, imagine how important it really is right now. And that's something I share every show, because I want people to know that the time and effort you invest in doing the work with this show is worth it. I know it's not sexy, though I am working on something that might make it a little bit more interesting, maybe. But it's really about the content of what I'm trying to share with you. Of course, now remember, if I happen to say something and you're like, hey, Maya, I have some thoughts. How can I get feedback on your show if I don't want to post something in comments? Or maybe I'm listening to a podcast. How can I comment? Pretty simple. You can always send me a virtual letter. It's pretty straightforward. You can virtual letter, AKA an email. Okay, I'm just being a little fancy, so to speak. You can always drop me one at getinspired@mayakai.com. So if an episode's got you thinking, reflecting on how to navigate a difficult situation, or you think it'd be a good podcast, episode, throw something at me. If the letter is good enough, I may dedicate an entire episode to it, because it has just that much kind of to it worth discussing. But usually I'll do a show that I reach into the Maya mailbag and I talk about maybe 3 or 4 letters of things that people have shared with me to address some questions that they may have. So if you want to get in touch with the show with a question or some feedback, go ahead and give me a virtual letter at getinspired@mayaakai.com. So that's how you can interact with the show if you're listening to the podcast. That's how you can also share your comments. All right. Something I wanted to start to do that I think is important is every month has something that is a day, or, like last month, it was Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Well, actually, this month is National Gratitude Month. And I thought, well, this is worth sharing because there's not enough gratitude in the world, that's for sure. So remember, it's National Gratitude Month. So this is a month, November, that we encourage people to embrace the power of gratitude. Ultimately, gratitude is more than simply saying thank you. Gratitude is something that literally is your ability to shift individually from thinking of ourselves and thinking of others and wanting to share. And right about now, we probably need a little bit more gratitude. So you know what? Use the month of November to start maybe kicking up your gratitude efforts and saying thank you, or showing appreciation to maybe somebody who doesn't feel appreciated. So National Gratitude Month. If you haven't been saying thank you enough, or showing that you actually appreciate somebody and their actions or what they do or their kind words, why not start now during National Gratitude Month? All right. I wanted to share that. I wanted to add some supplemental things, if it's a certain day or a month that we should be reflecting on good stuff. Let's jump into episode 59, understanding the power and purpose of saying no. Now, this is interesting because you have to practice what you preach. And I'm hoping by the end of this episode, this will make more sense to people about what no is and what no isn't, because I think it often kind of gets a negative connotation. So hence we gravitate away from it. Kind of like the idea of change has negative connotation tied to it. But when you take it at face value for what it is, it doesn't have to be negative at all. So I want to start out with a quote that kind of really got me thinking about it as I was reading this article. The art of no is about focus. What you decide to do, not do rather, leaves more room for doing what you need and want to do. And that was by Jennifer Moffett. She's a contributor at HuffPost.com. Let me read that again because this is where you should start to kind of move your f stops for all my photographers out there and understand what no means. The art of no is about focus. What you decide to not do, leaves more room for doing what you need and want to do. And this is where people really kind of get it confused because they don't think that no is really a focused response because it has so much negativity tied to it. When I decided to do this episode, you know, what I just said is why I thought it was important to kind of get people rethinking because saying no has a stigma tied to it. It's negative, it's bad, it's an awful thing to say, or God forbid, even hear. But in actuality, the word no simply means to affirm the answer to a question that might require no. Do you work tomorrow? No. Okay. Do you think you can give me a ride to work tomorrow? No, because you can't. But given the nature of what the question is why no gets so complicated. What gives the word no a negative connotation ultimately is the essence of the question, as I just kind of alluded to, or precisely what is the desired answer to the question, which is usually yes, I can versus no, I can't. So your answer doesn't necessarily have to be negative, it just might be factual, but it's not the answer that a person is looking for. So hence, now it becomes a negative thing. In this episode, we'll focus on how saying no means you have an understanding of why you're actually saying it. And when you understand why you're actually saying it, you can probably do a better job communicating to others why you are saying it. So let's talk about how the purpose of saying no is directly related to saying yes. They really work in tandem, believe it or not. But more importantly, when you say no to someone else, you're probably saying yes to you. Now, I'm pulling this information from Forbes.com because I read all kind of articles in different places. And this was a good article. By the way, I want to say this is one that I posted on M.A.Y.A. You can go to podcast resources and you can read the full article. But I pull some pieces from it that I'm like, this resonates with me. I agree. So when I say no, this is usually what's on my mind. And I realized that, do I have a process to how I say no? And I realized that I did, but I didn't think about it. It just kind of automatically happened. And I thought this would be good to help you put that in your toolbox. So we'll get to that a little bit later. But what's important about saying no is finding your yes. Good read on Forbes.com. So, before you can really be good at saying no, you have to know what you're saying yes to when you say no. And someone's like, yeah. When you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. The question is, what are you saying yes to? You see, usually if you're saying no, it should be because you see the opportunity that if you say yes, that you're going to pass up. And that opportunity might be time, which you don't get back, money, which you may or may not have to give. But what's more important is that mental or emotional space that you might be giving up when you say yes to something when you really should say no. So, what you should be asking yourself is, what is the benefit to this if I say yes? Now, let me just say this. Every answer you give to somebody is not nearly as rigorous as this. I'm talking about the really big questions that people ask you that you got to really think about. This isn't like the everyday thing you have to go through. I'm talking about those things that you really want to say no. Like, if you can say yes easily, then that's okay. But if you remotely have no in the back of your mind, but you're struggling to get it out your mouth, the question is why. So then that's when you think about the opportunity. But then you start thinking about, well, what's the benefit? Because when you do things, it should be about opportunity and benefit. So saying no, and what respectfully should be something that really requires thought or action, should yield benefit, also known as something that produces good or hopeful or an effect that promotes well-being. So if you're having to say no to something because it promotes well-being, it's promoting your mental wellness, then it's a worthy no. We'll dive into that a little deeper down the road. But When you say benefit should also have advantage. I know it's often we don't think about decision making like this, and that's part of the problem, is that we don't give it the deep thought that we should to really arrive to the right answers that sometimes might be good for us. It might be better for someone else because you do have to learn compromise in some situations. But ultimately, if it's something really heavy, you should think about it. So it should have benefit for you and there should be advantage. So when you are working from a point of benefit or advantage, and this is what's important to think about, you have to know what's important to you and why. You know, that episode way back about core values and stuff usually can help with this yes and no answer thing. Seriously. I'm not talking about can you give me a ride to work? That's a simple yes or no. Either you can or you can't. I'm talking about somebody asking you to do something that really might be taking you out of the way or really may not be good for you or convenient or whatever. It could clearly just be about timing. And this is where you have to start and think about things like, okay, if I say yes, what's the benefit or advantage? And if it's not or none, but you're okay with that, okay. But if you have to say yes to something that really is going to be a setback for you, that's when you have to start really thinking about benefit and advantage. So knowing what is important to you and why is key. It's also known as prioritizing, something that people often don't do enough of. Do you know, and can you actually articulate to me if someone was to ask you, what's important to you at work, at home? And if you can put those thoughts or those values or those needs or those wants, whatever, if you can put them into words, then you can make better decisions because you can articulate the thought. Sometimes that self-talk, that internal talk will come out and you'll be like, okay, here's a reason why I don't need to do this. Now, if you feel a little silly doing the self-talk because people think it's funny, yes, no, self-talk is perfectly healthy. It helps you to navigate difficult situations. And I often say the best self-talk is when you really look at yourself, when you got to make tough decisions. Go stand in your mirror and know you're not nuts and have the conversation like, you know why you shouldn't be doing this. So why are you doing it? Look at yourself and really think through what you're saying for those really tough decisions. So when you know what's important, you prioritize it and you can put it into words, it makes it easier to make decisions about what you need to do. Understand, and I know a lot of people they don't get this thing about self-talk, which is part of the process, but it can help you to not be reactive to every opportunity or request by just saying yes because you don't feel like you can say no. That's why I said there's power and purpose in understanding no. Weighing into the comment, Sarita Worley, hello, good to see you there. Very see you there. Very healthy. Yes, no is very healthy. And over time, when you learn that it's not a negative thing, it's not adverse, that sometimes it truly has a purpose that needs to be used, you get it. But a lot of times people struggle with it because we are given from a societal and even familial standpoint of our values, saying no is bad. And saying yes sometimes is what you always need to do. It's interesting how we are socialized into saying yes and no. So finding your yes is important. Check out the article at Forbes.com. If you go to M.A.Y.A, you go to the podcast resource tab, scroll right down there. All the resources for episode 59 are right there at the top. And you can click through and read that article at Forbes. I thought it was a really good read. Let's have our first real talk time of the show. You know, I try to keep it at 1, but I kind of led into this, what I just said previously. I want you to ask yourself this question and be very honest about it. How often have you not wanted to do something because it was not in the best interest of time, your energy, your money, or mental or emotional space, but you did it anyways? That we'll dive into a little later, especially when we talk about the emotional and mental space piece, because that's where people will often compromise. How many times have you given someone money and you wanted to say no? You knew that you weren't going to get the money back, but you gave it to them anyways. But then you reconciled giving it to them by saying, I knew I wasn't supposed to give them the money, so if I don't get it back, I can only be mad at me. I would say though, but why did you give them the money if you knew you weren't going to give it back? Now, if you're just feeling really charitable and you feel like, you know what, they really need it, it doesn't matter if they can't pay me back. Okay. Because every situation or scenario has obviously lots of different parts to it, moving parts. So only you will know why you did it. But especially, I will hear people say, you know, I gave them the money even though I know they're going to go waste it on this. And I'm like looking like, why did you do it? Why didn't you just say no? Because the thing about it is, when you're too conditioned to saying yes all the time, people will learn to take advantage of it because they know you can't say no. So start thinking about, if you're continually saying yes, but it's really not in your best interest or time, energy, like you're like, I really don't want to do this because I've done this a million times with this person and I know what the outcome is. There's a time to say no and to stop doing the same behaviors that yield the same outcomes that are not good. And then it sometimes has that emotional and mental impact on you. You know, I always say often we allow people to rent space in our heads for free. And I always like, why? You know, saying the mind is a terrible thing, the waste goes way beyond education. Common sense should be the root of that. And we should stop allowing people to get into our spaces that don't truly appreciate it. Being that it's National Gratitude Month, this would be a time to feel like, do you really feel appreciated by the people that you really do a lot of things for out of love, but what you get back in return doesn't really add up? That's key. Thank you for saying, Sarita. She said, exactly. You said, yes, you said yes, a precedence. That's the thing about people who don't know how to say no. They do. I say this all the time. And I get to the point where I stop saying it. You teach people how to treat you, good or bad. So if you accept someone's BS, and don't get me wrong, this is a growth point. It's experience and the learning curve that eventually gets you to the point where you have enough sense to say, I'm not doing this no more because I realize it's going to be the same outcome. So you can sing me that sad song you give me all the time, play that violin, cue it up. I know exactly what to expect from you based on your behavior. So if I keep going along with it, whose fault is it? So that's why when people enable people, but then get upset about, but they're not going to change. I said, and here you have the answer. So I'm asking you why you're still beating yourself up. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. So why do you keep saying yes? And you keep supporting the bad behavior. This is something you teach the kids about parents who struggle to say no. It's like, is it appropriate to say no? Yes. Will they learn something? Now, if you're just doing it to be mean, that's different. But I mean, if legitimately, okay, this is really like one of my biggest pet peeves. I'm serious, but I know why people do it. But I still look at them and say, this is not the way for all my Mandalorian people. I will watch people in the next several weeks spend every dime they have to buy Christmas gifts for their children that they cannot afford. They may not have their rent money, bills paid to keep the lights on, all kinds of stuff. But just so their kid can have this amazing Christmas, a commercial holiday, they will go for broke and then be in the hole for months. And I look and say, okay, this is a bad yes for time, for money, energy, emotional space, mental space, the whole nine yards. I'm not saying that a child can't have a good Christmas, but why does it all have to be materialistic? And why are you going for broke for something you don't have? I understand the need to make the child feel loved and wanted, but I also say, isn't there something deeper than just the material gifts? But we've come to be that way in society. And I think it's really sad because I watch people do it all the time. And then they'll be complaining after they've made the bad choice about how something isn't fair. And I just look at them like, you chose to walk that path and you knew what the outcome was going to be when you did it, that you were spending money that you didn't have. And I know it's difficult, but this is where learning how to say no and yes is really important. If your kid comes to you and asks for something you truly can't afford, then you say no, but then there's a supplemental question that can happen like, but perhaps we can do this, or maybe this is an option. I can't afford that at this time because of this, but what about this? It's real life conversations, but I understand there's a lot of parents who just, they don't want what they feel is to see their children, to see them being weak. And I said, you have no idea what you're teaching your children when you're honest about life. They see and understand more than what you think. So understanding when to say no is important. So ask yourself, have I been mentally and emotionally trained to say no when I shouldn't, or thinking that saying no is bad? No is undesirable, or I don't want to be disagreeable. Or do you have that personality that's a caregiver or a giver? So at the essence or core of who you are, just based on your personality, you struggle with telling people no, even when you know you should, because it makes you feel bad or feel guilty, even when it really doesn't make any sense. If that's the case, then this is when we actually have to learn to be counterintuitive to our approach to saying no. Especially if you have that caregiving or giver type personality, it's going to be a struggle for you because this is a part of you that just wants to make other people happy. You want to make sure they're not uncomfortable, but you'll be uncomfortable, which I'm not saying is a bad trait, but it can become a detriment to your own health, emotionally and mentally, if you're doing more than what you should be doing. If you can't ever put yourself first, even when it makes sense, that can be a detriment. So let's get a little counterintuitive to the approach to saying no. Now, contrary to intuition, or let's say common sense, because that's what counterintuitiveness is. It's being contrary to intuition, like I think, or it's more based in common sense. Learning how to say you can't is important, and understanding why you can't. So if you're being counterintuitive, if a person can think enough to ask you because they know you can, or you have, or you will, then you should be able to say, no, thank you. And if they respect you, they'll understand it. They'll accept that they thought enough of you to ask. And if you say, at that time, I just can't do that right now. I'm sorry, I can't. And you shouldn't walk away feeling guilty if you really feel like you made the right decision. You should always reply being honest with people, and never stop being gracious and fair. Never say no maliciously. I mean, that's not the point of what this episode's about. It's like understanding that saying no is the right thing for you to say, and how you choose to say it matters. What they always say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, that how people take things in. If someone asks you to do something that you don't feel comfortable with, or you just don't feel you can do, then you can say it. I appreciate you thinking of me, but this is something, unfortunately, I can't help you with. I just have other things going on. At that point, you don't owe any other further explanation. And if you feel someone is pushing you into that, that's a problem, because they asked, you said no, and that should be enough. And if they keep pushing, then the question is, why are they leaning on you so heavily if you've made it clear you can't do something? Then all of a sudden they start guilting you, is usually how it works. Say your no and stand firm to it. And they keep pushing it. It says, I'm not sure quite if you understood what I said, but the answer was no, and it doesn't change. I'm sorry. This is something I can't help you with. And you don't owe them a ton of explanation unless for some reason it's that type of relationship where you feel that giving additional answers to what they're asking for and why you're saying no is warranted. So if you're saying, yes to something that you have no energy for, no interest in, or it's not a priority to you, then you're not being fair to yourself. If you're the person that everybody runs to for something, that gets to be exhausting. So learning how to say no and being counterintuitive with is important. So learn how to say these things. Put these things in your toolbox. No, I can't do that, but I can do this. So maybe you can't do exactly what they asked for, but you can do something else that fits in comfortably for you, and that's how you prefer to do it. That's fair. No, I'm not available to that commitment, especially to something if you don't have the time. People often overcommit themselves when they don't have the time and energy, and they wear themselves down because they're too afraid to say no. So learning to say, no, I'm not available to commit to something like that at this time, but I do appreciate you asking me. Okay, if they want to be upset about it, then it's okay, because you were honest and you were fair and you were gracious in your response. So learn how to say those two things when you really can't do something. I can't do that, but I can do this. Or I'm not available to commit to that right now, but thank you for thinking of me. I'm sorry I can't help you at this time. That's fair. And you don't even have to say the I'm sorry part. Something else that people, when you're being counterintuitive, have to think about, and this is interesting, and this is sometimes I think where we tend to muddy the waters and say way too many yeses. When somebody asks you something, all your answers, you do have to remember it's not always about you. Because we do have people in our lives that we care about, that we make a priority, that we look at as having high value relationships. That's an episode on that. That's about prioritizing things. So if someone of value comes to you, that they mean something to you, and that relationship really, it's a high value relationship, then before you say no, you're going to think about it, because the person coming to you has value. And so I get there are times when you literally will probably say yes, even maybe when you don't have the time, because it's called compromise in those relationships that you feel honestly are worth it. But even within relationships, boundaries are extremely important. and understanding your boundaries and being able to articulate them to people are extremely important. So when you start having these deep conversations with people that really matter, make sure you always do it calm, with a clear head, and then act accordingly. So if you said no and they come back and ask again, stick to your answer. Sometimes people just want to see if they can get you to change their mind. If legitimately you can't do it, you can't do it. But learning how to be counterintuitive in the approach and using common sense is a big part of it. You're tuned into Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition. This is episode 59, understanding the purpose and power of saying no. So let's take a break. We take one during the show. You can reflect a bit on what I said. And we're going to expand the conversation on the second half of the show on how to act on purpose when using no and how this gives you power and it allows you to execute and live the life that you actually want to live. That's something a lot of people struggle with, is living the life they want to live because they're so busy living the life that other people have them living. Putting no into your toolbox can be that first thing that can really help you to begin to make this make a lot of sense to yourself. All right, sit tight, everybody. I'll be right back after this commercial break.
Please stop and listen, because this important message may directly apply to you or someone dear to you. Several thousand African American former full-time CPS teachers were unfairly terminated starting in the mid-90s and continuing to the 2000s. If you are one of those many former CPS teachers who was unjustly terminated, or if you are the immediate relative of a now deceased unjustly terminated former CPS teacher, you may qualify to participate in a lawsuit at no upfront cost to you. Please call 773-580-7183 immediately for more information. That's 773-580-7183. Do not delay. Act today, because time is of the essence. That's 773-580-7183. 773-580-7183.
I can't breathe. I have migraines, numbness, weight loss. I live with it every day. The illness that I'm suffering from is an anxiety disorder, and it deserves to be treated like any other illness. But it's not.
You may not realize it, but these words, often used to describe someone with a mental health condition, can be very harmful. In a country where 1 in 5 people are affected by a mental health condition, it's time for all of us to step up and change the conversation. Just because someone's struggle isn't obvious on the outside doesn't mean they aren't hurting on the inside. We need to see the person, not the condition. Join with me, pledge to be stigma-free.
Whether you're on the go or listening on your cell phone, tablet, or laptop, you can find the show in the iTunes, Google, and iHeartRadio platforms.
With all due respect, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just search Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and get ready to be inspired and motivated to harness your ambition.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition, a little shameless self-promotion I do every show. This is episode 59, understanding the purpose and power of saying no. And the anxiety PSA, it ends with something that I want people to think about. Illness is illness. Health, mental health is health. And we stigmatized it so much. I think recently in the last year and a half, people have come to realize it more than they ever had. I recently have had some people I know that have been in some really difficult situations. Carjacking, shooting, just a lot of stuff is going on right now within everybody's respective communities. And right now, your mental wellness is probably more important than you will ever know. It's being challenged on so many levels. And, it was interesting because both people were like obviously shaken by what happened to them, and they were sharing the experience. And I said, physically, this person is okay, but I could tell mentally they were shaken. And most of us would be. Just because you're aware of your mental wellness doesn't mean when a situation happens that, you're going to be absolutely prepared and you're going to be okay with it. But at least when you're working on yourself, and you know that adversity can happen, it does help to bounce back a little bit. So this is why I'm saying your mental wellness has probably been tested more, all of us, in the last year and a half, just because of obviously COVID-19. But hopefully within that challenge, I salute the people who took the time to grow and to learn and to not let it be something that totally changed their life in a way that they don't think that they can get back to what is going to be normal. Yes, there's a new normal, but a new normal is never a bad thing. See, that's about change and people struggling with the idea of change. So I share those PSAs. I think they share very subtle messages that are important for people to understand. But what we really should understand is how to say no, because there's a purpose to it. And when you learn the purpose, it empowers you and it gets you on track to living the life that you want to live. Let's jump into having a toolbox. So if I tell you you should have something, you should know how to use it properly. So let's go ahead and jump into what is really officially our first toolbox time of the show. We talk about EI. I'm like, that's a given. It's a tool that we take out, but it's not our official first time of the show. That's a tool. We're adding to the toolbox when we get to this part of the show. So I want you to learn how to make no more of an affirmation and positive versus negative. And it's all about perspective, which, by the way, is something else in your toolbox. There's an episode way back one about perspective and versus perception. There's a slight difference, but understanding how they work in your thinking is important. So if we can take the word no and understand it isn't necessarily negative, it may be the necessary answer to a question. It may be an affirmation of something that might be an affirmation for you. It may feel negative to somebody else, but it may be positive and adding benefit to or an advantage in regards to your time, your energy, your emotional and mental health. There's a reason to say no. So here's what I want you to do when you're really given those big challenges. Now, I'm not talking about the, can you give me a ride to work? Can you loan me $10? I mean, somebody comes to you with something that you really have to think about. You're just not comfortable with it, what they're asking you to do. We all have situations like that. So let's say, here's one that's kind of financial based, but I think this is something that everybody can connect to on some level. Say somebody comes to you and says, hey, I really need a car. My credit isn't good enough for me to do it on my own. I was wondering, here's two scenarios on it. If, you could get me the car and I could pay you back, and or I can get it if I have a cosigner. Okay. Instantly the wheels should be like, danger, Will Robinson, danger's like, hell no. Not just no, but hell no. I hate to seem mean. But if you're going to be counterintuitive in this process, the front end of the conversation already told you why you should say no. If a person comes to you and says they can't afford it, their credit is bad, so now you're dealing with a person who hasn't been responsible enough with other endeavors, and now they can't move forward and do things. Do you have enough trust if they couldn't do it for themselves that they'll be consistent with you? It's called honesty. And it could be, let's be honest, it could be a significant other. It might be a relative. So hence, it's now that high value relationship is involved. So there's a sense of, I want to help. I hate to say no, but there's a reason why you should say no. So before you make a decision in your mind, determine, is it a yes feeling or is it a no feeling? And here's a process I want you to walk through before you give an answer. It's fair to say this. One, I'm going to need to think about this. Not that I'm saying yes, but what are the details to what you're asking me? So before you just say no, ask them for the details. And they may say, okay, I'm trying to do this. The car costs this much. So I've got this much to put down. Not sure how much the payment would be, but I could afford, let's say, $300 a month. And that's that. Or they might say, well, the car costs this much. I'm going to put this much down. I'm anticipating that it's going to be, my car note's going to be $300 a month. And this all works with a cosigner. So say they give you the details. That's when you say, you know something, I need to think about this and I'll get back to you. If they pressure you, feel free to say no. Say, I'm sorry, this is something I have to think about because this is a big financial commitment. And before I say yes to this, I need to make sure that I'm comfortable with this and that it's even viable that I can do it. If someone tries to pressure you into something, that's to me, you can come out the gate saying no. Because if they don't respect you enough to give you the time that you need to reflect on if this is appropriate for you or if it works for you, then so be it. Say no. Say, well, if you need to answer now, then the answer is no. It doesn't mean the answer is going to be yes when I come back, but I'm not going to say yes to something that I'm not comfortable with. So if you need to answer today, the answer is no. They'll probably stand down and they may say, well, maybe when can I expect an answer for you? And then that's a fair question to be like, you know what, I need a day or two to think about it and I'll get back to you. Again, if they pressure you, like, look, you're asking me to make an investment in something that I need to think about, several things. And let's just say that you're a person that maybe you're married. So you may have to confer with somebody else if this is something that's okay. We know how we like to do things with other family members and it causes frictions in our relationships, especially if we're married. So you might have to confer with somebody else if this is going to be doable. Thank you, Michael Carson, for weighing into the show. He says, nope, I've learned my lesson years ago the hard way. I found an app and signed a lease for a friend and his family in need. And he and his family never moved and ghosted me. I was on the hook for the lease, which I couldn't afford. Bad decision. That's exactly what I'm talking about. How you said friend, family, high value relationship, trying to help somebody. Now, I guess the question I would ask you if we were processing this in hindsight is, how well did you know them? Did you think they would do that to you? What was their financial history? But you know what the caveat was in that very thing that you just described, which is similar to the scenario I'm saying? They can't do it on their own. And the question is why? They've been financially irresponsible. And why it is that people that are financially irresponsible always go to people who are tells you a lot. And that's kind of your red flag. A person who I know is financially irresponsible is asking me to do something, and it's probably not a good idea. So with that being said, especially if it's a relationship that you have a lot of value in, sleep on it. You know, give it time to breathe. And it might take a day or two. Sit down and really weigh the pros and the cons. It's okay to ask yourself. Me saying no doesn't mean I don't love you as a friend or care about you. It just means I'm not trying to put my money into something that I know doesn't make sense. Again, if you giveth with the expectation that you're not going to get it back, whole nother scenario. So be it. But if you have an expectation that you expected back, the question you have to ask yourself before you give is, can they pay you back given the financial duress they're already in? Two, if you're putting on your name on something, that means if you do have good credit, now you're sacrificing yourself for someone who has a history of not doing things good. So now you get bad credit too. Really? There's a lot of reasons to say no to both these scenarios. And I think because of high value relationships, we get guilted into doing things that we shouldn't do. Michael weighed in and said that he had history with the person. He knew him. So he probably felt he was good for it. I guess that was a relationship that or friendship that probably ended just because of how he handled it. So before you make any rash decisions, sleep on it. Give it time to breathe. Weigh the pros and the cons. But more importantly, think about the person that's asking you to do something. Are they a person of integrity? And can you expect to get back what they tell you? Now, if you've done something for them before and they were consistent, okay. But when things especially get lofty, when people start asking you to put your name on stuff, that's when you have to be like, wow, but if this falls through, this now all falls on me. Am I going to be okay with that? That's key. Now, something that you should think about in all this when I say sleep on it, even if you feel like saying yes and you have slight doubt, think about it. But here's when you're sleeping on it and you're letting it breathe. Here's what I want you to think about. Ask yourself these questions. Understand what they're asking you for specifically. Money, you to be a cosigner, whatever it is. And think about the gravity and the repercussions of what they're asking you to do. And will there be fallout that can affect you? Two, do you feel okay? Does it work for you? If you have any uneasiness, like, I don't feel comfortable with being anybody's cosigner because anything could happen that this could all fall back on me. And I'm not going to be able to go to the creditor and say, oh, well, this was a situation. They don't care. They just want their money. So if it makes you feel uncomfortable, if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't feel obligated or guilted into saying yes. And, can you help them? And does it require some revision maybe? in that sense. So say, you have a child and they're coming to you and they're asking you to help to get a car and you want to help, but you feel like this is an independent venture they need to do. You say, something, I'm not willing to be your co-signer. I don't want that level of responsibility. But maybe we can go look at something and find something that's more affordable. And maybe instead you can give them some money towards the car. So then you're not being responsible for it. Because you're not letting them, off the hook with the responsibility. So ask yourself those 3 questions. Are you comfortable with it? Can you revise what they're asking for so that it makes you more comfortable? Those are questions you should be asking yourself when you're sleeping on it. The next thing I want you to think about is when you decide, make sure you're actually saying no. So say you decide, nope, not doing it, not feeling comfortable with this. I slept on it. I woke up still not feeling good about it. When they say trust your gut, sometimes you should. So make no mistake about it. No is a very powerful word that you should not be afraid to use. So if and when that time comes to say, you need to avoid phrases like, I don't think I can, or I'm not certain, because you're leaving the door open for them to think that you might change your mind and that you might say yes. So when you use phrases like that, they are not straight and to the point. So when you're saying no, make sure it's definitive and you're not leaving the door open like possibly you might say yes. Because people prey on that. They do. They're like, well, she said, I'm not certain. What do people say often? If you have no answer, sometimes it's like saying no or yes, depending on the person. So that's a key thing. So when you come back and when you go and you have your time to sleep on it, be very clear about it. Say, I understand what you're asking me. We've talked about the details. I just need to think about this because I'm not sure how I feel about this right now. So I'm not saying yes. I'm not saying no. I'm thinking on it and I'll come back and let you know. Clear and to the point. And when you come back, if the answer is no, make sure it's no. So something else, especially if you get people that are pushy and manipulative, be prepared to repeat yourself or make sure you're understood. You can leave the door open for questions if necessary once you say no. So if you say no and they're like, well, why? Because like I said, sometimes you'll be like, no, I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm sorry. And actually, you don't have to say I'm sorry. Just know I'm not going to be able to do that. Depending on the relationship you have with that person, they may be like, well, why? And if you really have this high value relationship, you're going to probably say, because right now, financially, it's not a good time for me. But dealing in truth is even better. And the truth hurts. That's why people lie all the time, because they don't want to cut to the chase. I've learned, to be honest, and I noticed when I was honest, that person stopped asking me for stuff. They asked me for some money and I said, no, because I know that you're not going to pay me back. And I'm actually not okay with that, because I know you came to me asking me your money, leading with you would pay me back, but we know based on your history, you're not. So I'm saying no, because I know I'm not going to get it back and I'm not doing it. And the fact that you came to me saying that you could pay me back and you and I both know you're not going to, I'm not going to do it because you didn't even lead with honesty. That's it. I said no. And I found when I was honest with that person, and yeah, I was that abrupt. I would probably tell you not to be that raw, but that person deserved that rawness from me at that point. They did, because of their pattern of behavior. I was very clear about, I'm not doing this because I know exactly what to expect from you. And no, we're beyond disappointment. We're beyond expectation. So I'm saying no, because I'm not into charity of just giving you my money. It doesn't matter if I have it or not. Something else that people run into, letting people move in with them because they happen to have the space, and it turns into a disaster. And the whole time they wanted to say no. So stick with what your gut tells you. If it's telling you no, say no, and be prepared to repeat yourself. No, why? I don't want that. I just don't want people in my space that way. It's nothing personal. It's just something that I'm willing to do at this time. I just need my space. They can be mad if they want, because guess what? It's your space. And they're the ones that don't have a space. Now, if you say yes, it's always important that, because remember we talked about priority and compromise. If it's somebody that you really care for and you want to allow them into your space, it's clear to put the boundaries down. You can come and stay with me, but you can only stay here for a month. Beware when you let people come and live with you, that can come back to bite you. That in Illinois, and could be the same in other states, once a person establishes residency in your home, you then just can't kick them out. You have to evict them. So now ask yourself the question, do you really want to go through that much of a headache? And it happens all the time. We feel guilted into giving someone shelter because they've made a poor decision. and now they don't have shelter. So it's just a lot when you say no that you have to process. So be prepared to repeat yourself. Make sure you're understood. No, I'm not going to be changing my mind on this. And if it's a valued relationship, leave the door open up for questions. Be honest. If it's because you know they won't pay you back and you don't have it, then say it. Nothing personal. I'm not going to loan you the money because I know you won't pay me back and I don't have it to give. You could have it to give and say no. Like, no, I'm not going to give you the money because we've done this before and you've never paid me back last time. And I just don't particularly care for the fact that I feel that takes advantage of me. If that's the reason why you're saying no, be clear and concise about why you're saying no. Because you know what? That might be an eye-opening epiphany for that person. Seriously. Michael Carson waited and said, nope, no squatters. I'd rather give someone money. I'm not trying to do nothing. It's a very interesting situation that people have got him in with that. So that's key. So that's the way I want you to kind of process how to say no. I know it's not easy, but people may give you pushback and you have to be able to stand firm into it. And remember, when you say no, you don't have to apologize. While politeness is important, how you say things to people is important. When you learn to say no, apologizing just makes it sound weaker. I mean, sometimes you need to stand your ground. No, I won't be able to do that for you. No, I'm sorry. I won't be able to do that for you. I won't be able to do that for you. And sometimes people may be shocked, like, what? I won't be able to do that for you. This doesn't work for me at this time. I don't have the resources for that. I don't feel comfortable with what you asked me to do. That's it. Be honest. Don't be rude. And I think people struggle with that. You need to be firm and unapologetic about guarding your time, your money, your energy, your mental and emotional space. You don't have to compromise that because somebody else has found themselves, especially if it's repeated behavior, in a compromising position. So when you say no, realize that you have nothing to feel bad about. You have every right to ensure you have the time for the things that are important to you, that your money is not being exploited or misused, but more importantly, that you don't emotionally and mentally don't feel like you're being raked over the coals by somebody because they know you have a kindness about you. And people tend to exploit that. So, episode takeaways. Just say no. Isn't that what we said about drugs? Just say no. Saying no is not selfish. That's the first thing you have to, uncondition yourself. Take that away. Saying no isn't selfish. When you clearly understand why you're saying it, because you've prioritized, you understand the reasons for why you're saying it, and it compromises or it has no benefit or advantage. But more importantly, if it isn't a high value relationship, you really shouldn't really go nuts about it. And even with high value relationships, don't forget your boundaries. Don't keep putting yourself in compromising positions because you feel obligated to do something that others are not doing for themselves. I know that sounds very harsh, but it's really true because that's how you stop a cycle of people being manipulative or abusive towards you. So be truthful and honest and upfront is never easy. So we often take the easy road, let's be honest, and we end up in places we don't want to be. Understanding that no helps you to stay on course and focus is paramount in this. And it may be the hardest tool that you will ever use or actually learn to employ of every tool I give you each show. This is the one, especially if it's close to your heart, that will be the hardest to use. But when you begin to learn that you're saying no for the right reasons and not for the wrong reasons, that's when it becomes easier for you to do. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your support of always listening. Remember, the purpose of this episode, as well as all the other podcasts, is to help you to identify your ambition and harness that motivation to help you to get there. I'm not your counselor, your therapist. I'm not here for advice. I'm just here to get you thinking, to get the wheels turning. And maybe you do feel like, I'm struggling with this. I do need to go talk to somebody because I'm just not getting to where I need to be with my mental wellness, or I don't feel like I have that support system that I can talk about these things with without it giving me pushback or judgmental. I don't have that space. That's what your counselor and therapist is for. It's your space that you get to create, and you get to work on you without judgment, without impairment. It's all about you, and that's the space that's appropriate. So remember, every episode I have, you can always find it at your podcast platform of choice. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audible, Spotify, you name it. Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and you'll be able to find episodes there. Of course, you can always find episodes of Maya at MA.A.K.com. Remember, with every episode, there is podcast companions. So all you have to do is go to MA.A.K.com, click on podcast resources. Episode 59 is right there at the top. I think I have 3 different things there that I thought would be great to kind of add depth to the conversation. Hopefully by now you have subscribed to my YouTube channel. Search M.A.Y.A, scroll past all the Japanese anime, and boom, there I am. Hopefully you are getting social with me. You can find me at Maya_Akai, Twitter and Instagram, and M.A.Y.A Presents on Facebook. That's all the ways that you can get connected to the show. Episode 60, who knows what it'll be about next. But either way, as I always say, every episode, and I hope by now you know what this means. Remember, your present becomes your past, and your future is no more. By the way, I totally stole that from Pearl Jam. It's from a song. But anyways, so make the most of every single day. Because I'll be honest, folks, we don't know when our time expires. So make the most of every single day. Love, live, appreciate people, and make sure you're getting that in return. So be well. More importantly, please, be safe. But the thing I enjoy telling people more than anything else in the world is keep being absolutely amazing. Ciao.
Get inspired, get motivated with M.A.Y.A and the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast.
Something that I take pride in is trying to be forward thinking outside the box, challenging myself. And as I challenge myself, hopefully I challenge you.
Find M.A.Y.A on Twitter and Instagram at M.A.Y.A_Akai. On Facebook at M.A.Y.A Presents.
We're going to talk health, wealth, fitness, mental health, financial, lots of different things that can empower you as you seek out the ambition that you're pursuing.
Or get everything M.A.Y.A at M.A.Y.A.Akai.com.